I mean, let's face
Okay.
it. H.G. Wells had a great story about the War of the Worlds.
You bet. You bet.
Yeah, it's to think that we're the only ones. It's got a bit of hubris there, right?
Hi, Natalie.
Hi, good morning.
Good
Hi.
morning. And Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you, same to you.
Well,
You still don't see Pam Katz.
I don't know what else to tell you.
She's trying to get back in, I assume.
There you
There you
are.
go.
There I am.
Yay!
Oh, good for you.
I don't know why I got a 5-minute delay there, but anyway.
All right. Well, since now Pam has now finally joined us,
Sorry about that.
let's go ahead and begin with the blessing, Rabbi. Is that all right?
Yep.
All right. Together, Baruch Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, tzivanu b'zot divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the world, who has sanctified us with your commandments, and commanded us to engage in the words of Torah. Amen. Hey, Rabbi, it's all yours, and we are recording.
Oh my. So does that mean what's being recorded is going to be
It'll
kept
be
for
held against you.
you got me all nervous here, Steve.
I know, I can tell.
Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you all had a meaningful Yom Kippur. I'm back to drinking coffee. One morning without it, and it didn't kill me. I thought it would. We welcome Bernie back from his sabbatical. We have a task force to go out to Denver to move him back to Phoenix.
Absolutely.
And Sai's going to carry the heavy furniture, and Richard's going to check your ear, nose, and throat to make sure that you're all set. And then we're going to come back. So we're going to start the new year now. This is a big day. We do want to have a coffee or a light lunch, maybe a Panera Bread, to talk about Torah study. About several months ago, was it a year ago already? We tried other sources. We couldn't find anything good. I think we should revisit that and see if we can use something other than Harvey Fields. We like Harvey Fields because he gives us a theme. Every day it's a question, and he gives us summarizes some commentaries, but it's like probably written 50 years ago. And it would be nice to find something a little bit more modern and maybe a little bit more advanced. So in terms of Panera Breads, if you want to send me email, if you're interested in coming to this, and if so, when would be good? If you come, what we want to talk about is what are some other sources that we can use for the Torah study, and what we can do to make the Torah study more fun and more effective for everybody. Can you hear me and see me okay?
Rabbi, does the URJ have parshas that we could use, or are they?
Yeah,
not-
they come out with them all the time. You can find them on urj.org. And so they're there, but they don't take Harvey Field's approach, as far as I can see. They're just one person talking about it, but
One of the good things.
yes.
One of the good things about it is that it does give us the commentaries of Jewish
Right.
scholars over the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
It's not going to know.
And so I'm not really looking to change the system. I just want something. If Harvey Fields was alive, I would ask him to write something a little more just new, but using his approach.
Right.
But that is our conundrum. So anyway, so we now had Yom Kippur. Everybody did well, and you've resolved to be better people and not to curse and cuss and threaten people in Torah study.
And you did an excellent job too.
Yes, you did.
Thank you, thank you. It's really nice working with the canner. He's just a very it's just was nice.
He works
And
hard too, yeah.
I didn't get hungry because the whole like day and a half or 2 days before, I just roasted in my Ninja Foodie vegetables and chicken with no spices, not even oregano, not garlic, nothing.
Hmm.
And certainly not salt, but nothing, no bread, nothing processed, nothing out, just raw vegetables and raw chicken. And it worked. It worked. I didn't get hungry at all. Okay, so now we are starting a new Torah cycle. So we're back with this week will be Sukkot, and then next week will be Simchat Torah. But for us, we're starting Bereshit today. And so you can find the reading, I believe, on page 21. Is there a Jewish view about creation? So before we start the new year, raise your hand if you are a fundamentalist.
Meaning,
Okay,
Right, Mimi.
Steve and Pam.
Meaning,
Well, what is a fundamentalist? A fundamentalist is the word comes from when they were studying Protestant evangelicals 100 and something years ago. So they took the English version of the Bible that they had, and they said this is the fundamentals, meaning that everything written there was true. So a fundamentalist is somebody who takes things literally and believes everything that they read, that's literal. So if it says God created the world in 6 days, it means God created the world in 6 days. Maybe you could fiddle with it and say, well, God's day is not one of our days. It's a little bit longer, but you accept what's written there. All right, so we had two, Pam and Steve were fundamentalists, but I think they both raised their hands by mistake. How many people see the Bible more as, metaphors and don't see it as reflecting any necessary historical reality necessarily?
Yeah.
Okay, Evelyn, Bernie, Marcia. And how many people are somewhere in the
and
Pam and Cy.
side? And Pam. How many people are somewhere in the middle that you want to see as much historical reality in the Torah as possible, but you're not a fundamentalist. Not everything is necessarily literal, but you like to see it as, reflecting some degree of historical truth. Okay, Richard, Natalie, and Shirley.
Well, I feel that there is an element of truth, veracity in elements of the Torah, but how much we don't know. And so maybe some of it is true and valid, but at the same time, to accept everything goes against the grain as far as I'm concerned. So
Evelyn, are you moving from the Bernie Cy camp into
Is she coming to our side?
the Richard Natalie camp?
just let's say the scale is moving just slightly, not too much, just very.
So she's halfway. So she doesn't want to move to your camp, Natalie. She wants her own camp.
What I own, right?
Where are you, Rabbi?
Oh, I'm not telling you.
that's not right. You never share. You're so afraid you're going to offend one of us.
Oh, that's not true. Marcia knows. Where's Marcia? Marcia knows exactly where I stand on things. So ask
In
Marcia.
rabbinical school, they tell you to, you could even.
No, I don't know if that's true. I think I just got it. Richard and then Cy.
Well, for me, the Bible, as you mentioned, has some truth to it, but a lot of it is mythology and allegory. Uh, um, uh, First of all, it really wasn't written down until the destruction of the first temple, if I remember right, if I'm correct in assuming that. So we're talking about a 2,000-year history of oral tradition, and that has to be periodically distorted. So, did a man like, for instance, Moses ever exist? Did King David ever exist? As far as I know, there's no archaeological evidence that King David ever existed to the present day. I think, and Rabbi, you'll know
Okay,
much more.
just to interrupt you, they found a stone they found a couple of things that may or may not mention David. And these are subject of tremendous disputes. And in one case, there was this tablet from this other civilization that I was studying about recently, and they found it in one piece. This is about 150 years ago. And then the French missionary who found it, there was a fight over who had the authority to sell it, and a Bedouin took it and smashed it up. They eventually reconstructed it, but there's one corner that's not totally reconstructed, and that's where there may be the word David. So there may be a little bit of evidence, but there may not. I'm sorry,
Right.
Richard.
So anyway, we have maybe evidence, maybe not evidence, but there's still a lot of truth to what the Bible sort of says.
There's a lot of truth. Now, we're not going to raise this question now, but I could ask everyone what is truth, but we're not going to get into that right now. Okay, Cy.
Well, it's interesting because I've been reading a book recently about politics, and when you talk about God, you're talking about a whole philosophy. And I would like to read this passage from the book that I was reading. I think it's interesting. What he says is this. He says, God is a Republican and Santa Claus is a Democrat. I have only one firm belief about the American political system, and that is this. God is a Republican and Santa Claus is a Democrat. God is an elderly, or at any rate, middle-aged male, a stern fellow, patriarchal rather than paternal, and a great believer in rules and regulations. He holds man strictly accountable for their actions. He has little apparent concerns for the material well-being of others. He is politically connected, socially powerful, and holds the mortgage on everything in the world. God is difficult. God is unsentimental. It is very hard to get into God's heavenly country club. Santa Claus is another matter. He's cute. He's non-threatening. He's always cheerful. He loves animals. He knows who's been naughty and who's been nice, but never does anything about it. He gives everyone everything they want without a thought of quid pro quo. He works hard for charity and is famously generous to the poor. Santa Claus is preferable to God in every way but one. There's no such thing as Santa Claus. I don't know if you're getting it.
What's the last line? There's no
such thing as Santa Claus.
Oh, okay. Oh. Now, how many did the course with me and Faye on America's Four Gods? Anybody? Nobody. Well, in that course, we ran it two or three times over the last couple of years. We do what Cy did basically, and we say that Americans believe in one of four gods, which is why it's called America's Four Gods, based on two questions. The first question is, do you believe that God plays a role in history, that God is out there doing things? And the other question is, do you believe that God judges us, either while we're alive or after we die? And so based on these answers, they come up with four types of God: the authoritative God, which is size God; the benevolent God, which is size Santa Claus; the critical God, which is a God that basically judges you after you die, but doesn't help you when you're alive; and the distant God, which is a God that neither helps nor hinders and is just a philosophic concept. And so you could see that, most people can accept one of these four types of gods. And so, so one of the difficulties in doing Torah study or giving sermons or anything is when like in the High Holy Days, we talked a lot about God, right? So, we prayed to God, and liturgy talks about God, and I don't have time to go through this. But what I tried to stress a little bit is that for the congregation, you have to then interpret these prayers in the light of whichever of these four gods you believe in. And it's a very different experience. So if you believe in the authoritative God, you believe that God is actually watching you and God is judging you. And that, that's a traditional Jewish view of God. So if Richard steals a donut from the donut shop, then God is seeing that. And God may say, I'm going to punish Richard. And so that kind of God you have to be very careful with. On the other hand, if God is an abstract concept, God is a philosophic reality, then God is completely uninterested in what we do here in the West Valley. Okay, God is not even interested in what they do in Scottsdale, by the way. God doesn't care what they do in New York. God is up there thinking about cosmic things. So God is a huge philosopher, and he's sitting there, with a few of his friends, Aristotle and Plato and Maimonides, and they're talking about great things, or they're talking about what Richard says about the entire universe and how there must be life in all these different places. And God says to Aristotle, yes, there's life here, there, and there, and I made it this, but they're talking about things that are of cosmic importance. So God doesn't care about us. God doesn't change anything in this world, not because maybe God could, but God doesn't. It's not God's role. That's not what God is about. So if you're praying on Yom Kippur to a philosophic God, that doesn't make it any less important, but God, you're not praying for God to save you from cancer or to, give you more credit on your credit card, because God just doesn't work on that level. You're looking at God as a philosophic construct, and you're trying to interact on that level. Meaningful, maybe. Is it practical? Is it going to change your day-to-day life? No. So how you look at God is just incredibly important for religion and also for Torah study. So, we don't really talk about this much, but how you look at God and how you look at whether God created the world, it affects how we're going to view this text that we're studying. Okay. Any other opening points here? Everybody's happy? Okay, Marcia.
Can I just say that when I went to Salicha's service, I missed Yom Kippur because I wasn't feeling well. But I went to Rosh Hashanah. But on Salichos, when I sat there with a little book,
Marcia, God knows this already, and God has talked to me about what would be a suitable punishment for missing Yom Kippur. I said, but she was sick.
I was
Have
sick,
some mercy upon her. So
please.
he put you on probation.
Okay. Well, it was because of Torah study. I had a lot of problems reading the prayers and all because my mind was going back and forth to what we talked about here and how to interpret the prayers in a way that was meaningful to me in what I've learned here. So, I mean, I just want to mention that. I don't know if other people have had that experience.
Right. The goal of Torah study is not to make you more devout. It's to make you more critical. It's to make you more like Bernie. So that may or may not be a good thing. You may all
It's
tell me
disconcerting. It is
you
very
may all
disconcerting.
start moving to Colorado one after another. But it's not, and that may turn someone off, that they said, no, I want a Torah study that will reinforce my faith, that will make me more pious. And so you can see why the Orthodox would not approve of someone like me, even though I'm not an extreme example of this. Just doing this critical sort of study, it tends to make you more thoughtful but less pious. Steve, and then who else wanted to talk? No, okay, just Steve.
Can't hear you.
Torah study also makes you think, and then also prompts you to ask the questions as to what you feel compared to the others, and therefore you can have that comparison and maybe even change your whole train of thought. So that's
And
what Torah study does for me.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think it's a great thing. I think it's an incredibly good thing.
But if you're a rabbi trying to get everyone to conform to a standardized form of Judaism, you don't really want people to think. You want them to just do what you tell them to do, or to do what everybody else is doing. So if you can get 200 or 300 people to all come at the right time and sit there in the right way, then you're happy. So Torah study doesn't really contribute to that, unfortunately, right, Steve?
Correct.
Yeah, but a rabbi
But
wouldn't keep their job very long if they had that action.
But we found an alternative. We have something we put into the break the fast, into the brownies, that can help make people conform. So,
But quick
Steve.
question for everybody. How many times,
Marijuana.
I'm
How
sorry,
many what?
how many times have you gone to your kids and said, God is looking over you, be careful for what you say or what you do?
No.
I
No?
never said that.
Oh, I did.
No, Richard says no. Pam says no.
No?
Natalie says
No,
no.
I used to say, make good choices.
Make
Just
your choices, but
But Steve's point is that if you put God into it, it may put the fear of God into little
Fear.
kids.
absolutely, yes.
It can
Yes,
help get the right result, at least in the short run. But these were very modern parents who took the long view.
I don't know about that. My parents were pretty modern at the time, in their time.
Okay, so we're on page 21. Is there a Jewish view about creation? Marcia, Minya's not here today. We are missing some people post Yom Kippur. But Marcia, would you start us off?
Sure. Okay. Is there a Jewish view about creation? There are many different views about how our planet and galaxy of stars originated. Most scientists who study the stars, they are called astrophysicists and cosmologists, believe that between 10 and 20 billion years ago, all of the matter of the universe concentrated in a single place and then exploded in a big bang. About 1 billion years later, clusters of galaxies dust and clumps of matter began to take shape. There were over 100 billion of them, each with an average of 100 billion stars. Among these was our Milky Way galaxy, containing a vast ocean of 400 billion stars. Scientists believe that many stars, such as our own, have planets revolving around them. When a star has revolving planets, this arrangement is called a solar system. Our planet Earth revolves around our star, Sol, the sun. Here on Earth, with all its shimmering blue skies, oceans, forests, deserts, and green valleys, is the only place in the cosmos where, to our knowledge, intelligent life has evolved.
Ah, ha, 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 ha. The key expression there is to our knowledge.
To our,
But
Are we doing-
there's some people who have been communicating with the Martians, and they've told me on good authority that the Martians are going to come visit the West Valley at some point in the next few years.
You better
So-
worry about it.
What,
They
I'm
may have
sorry?
been here with all those
Any
frequencies.
intelligent life that can visit the earth is far superior to what we are. And I therefore feel that we should be very, very apprehensive about that, because they have the ability to either conquer us or completely destroy us. So I would worry
Well-
about an alien visit.
Well, what my sources are telling me is they're buying up all the good real estate. But
But Evelyn,
They've been
That was-
over the head with those Phoenix.
Evelyn, be safe. It's okay, because the viruses will kill the bad guys from Mars.
That's what you think.
well, we definitely have people in our congregation who really believe that there are aliens that have been visiting us, not just one person, but several. So it is a belief that people have. And in some ways, it's almost like a religion. So there are people that believe in UFOs. It's like a belief. And, so of course, it may turn out in the future that most of these UFOs, unidentified flying objects, are Chinese warplanes or something that we just didn't know what they were. They weren't from aliens. They were from some technology that we weren't from other humans. But it won't matter. Belief is belief, as they say, right? Bernie.
I saw a bumper sticker recently that said, "Science doesn't care what you believe."
Good
And
one.
that's really, we want to differentiate. There's science and there's belief, and the two are completely separate. So but why does it come together here? Because we have a story at the beginning of the Torah about how the world was created. Is that world, when it was written a long, long time ago, it was both science and religion. Today, we want to move it into only the religion category. We're not looking at the Torah to help us understand, what happened 20 billion years ago. Richard, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I wanted to add to Bernie's statement. You could have a bumper sticker that also says a dogma always trumps science.
All right, so that's Pam or Natalie. Anything to add to that, Shirley? Okay, Marcia, back to you.
We want to do
The only
St.
thing I would
Charles-
say is don't put those bumper stickers on in today's society.
Yeah, be
Yeah.
careful.
Yes, I'm
Right,
very careful about that.
Somebody will vandalize your car.
Oh, that's the least of it.
Yeah.
Do you want to read the box? Sure.
Yeah, that was my
That's
question.
from Carl Sagan, a very famous astrophysicist.
At the beginning, scientist and writer Carl Sagan describes the awesome transformation that the Torah calls creation. At the beginning of this universe, there were no galaxy, stars, or planets, no life or civilizations, merely a uniform radiant fireball filling all space. The passage from the chaos of the Big Bang to the cosmos that we are beginning to know is the most awesome transformation of matter and energy that we have been privileged to glimpse. And until we find more intelligent beings elsewhere, we are ourselves the most spectacular of all the transformations, the remote descendants of the Big Bang, dedicated to understanding and further transforming the cosmos from which we spring.
Okay, stop there. So, Richard, what do you think of this? Is this something as a medical scientist that you could ascribe to?
You have to unmute, Richard.
Richard, we don't hear you.
You have to unmute.
Forgot, yeah, as a scientist and someone who believes that the theory of the Big Bang, I certainly can believe in this. But I can also say that God could have created the Big Bang and said to it, okay, now here's all the laws of physics. Now go transform and see what can happen.
Okay, yeah, and in reality, that would be the same thing, right? So whether
Yeah.
God's behind science or not, it's still science that determines the rules of the universe.
This is not necessarily science. Science is a study of the bodies
Of everything.
but rather the basically the physics of the universe determines what's going to happen. And you could say God started that.
But you notice that Sagan tries to introduce some sort of religious language into his scientific account. So he says the most awesome transformation of matter and energy that we've been privileged to glimpse.
Right.
So he's trying to be scientific, but to put a religious perspective on the scientific reality. Yes, Marcia.
Einstein did not have any compunction about linking God to the origin of the universe. I remember.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Not in a way that would be orthodox, but in a way that would be religious without being anti-scientific. Yes, correct. Bernie, Cy, Steve. Okay, Marcia, you can keep going.
Throughout history, people have gazed into the heavens or observed life on Earth and wondered how it all began. Nearly every culture developed an explanation. Thousands of years ago in the Middle East, the ancient Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians and Egyptians all told creation stories.
And Cy, you're reading about the Canaanites?
What about the Canaanites?
I think Cy has a book now on the Canaanites.
Well, the Canaanites were merely a huge group of people covering a large geographical area, so it was not very specific.
So it's all of these groups basically.
It's all of those groups, yes.
Yeah. Including possibly the Israelites, but we won't talk about that now.
Yes, yes.
All right. Don't say that so loudly. Okay, Marcia, back to you.
Most of these, like the Babylonian epic Enuma Elish, put forward the belief that many gods had created the heavens, earth, and human life. In most of these versions of creation, everything depended upon the whim of the gods. It was believed that they could order rain or blow away the clouds, send plagues, or wipe out whole populations with floods or famine. In these ancient stories, human beings were helpless. Whether they suffered or were successful and happy did not depend on their accomplishments, but rather on the arbitrary decisions of the gods.
Okay, now, and sometime we'll have to look at this because how the archaeologists over the past 150 years found a lot of these tablets in the ancient Near East is a very fascinating story. And in some cases, the archaeologists were brilliant. And we're talking about in the 1800s. And you can imagine these British guys with those little hats. They went off to Iraq and places like that. And in some cases, they found tremendous stuff and they knew how to handle all the material. In one case, somebody who really was not equipped did a tremendous amount of destruction to a very important site because he just didn't know what he was doing. And so and they found huge amounts of these clay tablets with writing on them. And so it's just unbelievably fascinating. And all these adventurers, and like sometimes they ran into like the one I told you about where the Bedouin got mad. There was two groups of Bedouin, I think, and one group said, we have the authority to sell this, and the other group said, we have the authority. And one of the guys just took the tablet, very, very important tablet, and he just smashed it down. And fortunately, they'd already made a cast of it, so they had a copy of most of it. And then they went later and they looked and they tried to find as many of the original pieces as they could. It's just an incredible story. Okay, so
You want to
what
read?
we're reading now, this is we're at the top of page 22 in the right corner. And this is Emuna Elish, which is a story that was told by several of the ancient cultures in slightly different forms, but it's a very famous creation story. Okay, top of page 22, right column.
I'll start with the holy house, the house of the gods, in a holy place had not yet been made. No reed had sprung up, no tree had been created, no brick had been laid, no building had been erected. The deep had not been made. Then there was a movement in the midst of the sea. At that time, Erudu was made. And the gods, the spirits of the earth, Marduk made at the same time. Marduk laid a reed on the face of the waters. He formed dust and poured it out beside the reed, that he might cause the gods to dwell in the dwelling of their heart's desire. He formed mankind.
And this is from Raphael Paté, was a famous anthropologist from Fairleigh Dickinson University. And you can see the name of his book, Hebrew Myths. So myths doesn't mean in this sense, in religious studies, if Marsha's son tells her, oh, I went outside and I couldn't get back in time because a dinosaur blocked the driveway, she may say that's a myth. But here we're not talking about myths being false. We're talking about them being stories that are told over and over. So whether it was true in a historical sense or not doesn't really concern us. The fact is that these are things that are being told over and over and over, and in this case, by multiple cultures. So how does this creation story come? Well, what is this creation story saying? I mean, who can summarize what it actually says? Richard?
Well, I can't exactly, it seems like a mishmash. But what I really wanted to say was that, in the paragraph to the right, where about like the Babylonians, the epic Emu story, believe that the gods create the heavens and earth, and that they controlled everything. If you think about destruction of human beings, Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And who I can't remember who turned us off because he turned to look at it.
Right. Who was that?
Yeah.
Not Lot.
Yeah, so that's God doing
who was that? Who was it? Sorry.
Was Lot, yeah.
No, it wasn't Lot. Who
Lot?
was it?
Wasn't it
No.
Why?
Wasn't it a female?
Yeah.
Yes.
Lot's wife?
Sarah.
So Natalie, put together the two things you said. You know it, but you didn't say it. What did you say? You said first you said Lot, and then you said a female. So who is it?
Lot's wife.
Yay, thank you. Thank you.
Who was
said
it?
that? Who said it?
She didn't hear. Natalie didn't hear.
No, I didn't
Who
hear.
said it?
Well, Lot's wife, I thought.
Oh,
Right,
thank you.
but what
Ellen.
was her name?
They
I-
doesn't have a name.
Sure, she didn't.
That's how unimportant she is.
Well,
Right.
women weren't important those days.
Get back. I
Well, she
mean,
only comes into the story because she was accompanying Lot. So she wasn't a character in his own right. But Lot's family was told to leave and not look back. And who looked back?
The wife.
Right.
Lot's
So,
wife.
and what happened to her?
She
She
turned
turned
into
into a pillar.
Pillar of salt.
There's all those pillars when you drive by of salt.
Exactly.
Right,
So
right. And
you,
what-
so you wonder if the mythology of the ancient world um, bled into or is part of the stories of God and creation and what God can do
Sure it is.
in the world. Nothing is in a vacuum.
Right,
So a lot of these, and this is Semitic, from the Middle East.
right.
And Richard, what is it called? Richard, what is it called in medicine when you're trying to find the source of a
You're trying to call it the etiology. What is the genetics of the pathogenesis geneticity of the disorder?
And so we use the same word etiology in religion. So the story of Lot's wife possibly came about because the ancients were trying to explain why are there all these salt pillars in the Dead Sea. So, you could say, well, there's just a lot of salt down there, but that didn't seem very satisfying. So you could say, well, God destroyed these two towns and he told the Lot's family to leave. And then, his wife looked back and she turned into a pillar of salt. And that's why there's so much salt there. That sounds a lot better. And that's called the etiology. So it's an etiological explanation where we suspect that the ancient Jewish biblical interpreters, the people that wrote the book of Genesis, were trying to explain something that they knew existed, the salt. And so they came up with a story to explain the reality, which is an etiological explanation. Marcia and then Pam. I knew Pam was going to raise her hand.
That last paragraph that we just read, that he might cause the gods to dwell in the dwelling of their heart's desire, he formed mankind. So basically, that thing is saying that the gods dwell within man.
Right.
That's the biggie sentence in that whole paragraph that I see.
Wow. The gods to dwell in the dwellings of their heart's desire. He formed mankind.
There's a comma there. There's no period. That's what they did to let God, the gods dwell.
Wow.
That's
Okay.
their way to look at it.
Pam.
And that's interesting. Yeah.
Pam.
Question, were the Jews the first one God people in ancient times?
She's trying to trip me up here. Well, the Egyptians had a king shortly before Moses who was sort of a monotheist. And he took over, and then he died rather suddenly. He had an ear, nose, and throat doctor who may have poisoned him. And then afterwards, they went back to being polytheists.
Yep, it was a very short reign.
Akhenaten, wasn't that Akhenaten?
Correct. So there is a theory that belief system was still running around in Egypt, and Moses, like Freud believed that Moses was an Egyptian who was a disciple of this pharaoh. So Moses was a monotheist an Egyptian monotheist in a country where they had rejected monotheism. And so he was looking for a group that would accept those beliefs, and his own people were not. And that's why Moses needed a speaker, Aaron, not because he was, according to the biblical account, because he had stuttering problems, but because he was an Egyptian, he didn't speak Hebrew. So this is Freud's explanation. If Freud had lived another 10 years, if he hadn't been such a compulsive pipe smoker and cocaine addict, I'm sure he would have written more books about Judaism. It would have been very interesting to see the older Freud talk about Jewish stuff, but he just got interested in it, as he was getting older and his medical practice was winding down, and he didn't want to leave Vienna. They had a practically drag him out of Vienna in 1939, just ahead of the Nazis. So he died in England a few months afterwards. But it's in but so no, the Israelites were not technically the first monotheists. It also depends how you call monotheism. Most of the historians believe that the Israelite monotheism took many hundreds of years to really fully develop. So you have monotheism that's not totally monotheistic. So it depends what you call what. Okay, Marcia, back to you.
The Jewish people introduced a revolutionary theory about the creation of the heavens, earth, and human life. Unlike the other ancient stories, which attribute all that was created in the heavens and on earth to numerous gods, the Torah begins by teaching that one God alone created everything. It puts forward the idea that creation is good and that the world and the galaxy of stars in which it spins are not a random accident, but have a unique design and purpose. Furthermore, the Torah teaches that human life is a result of God's will, and human beings are not toys of the gods. Instead, human beings are created in God's image. They have choices and can exercise freedom. They are partners with God in shaping life and preserving the world.
Okay, stop there. So we're created in the image of God. What does that mean? Evelyn, Natalie, Shirley, Pam?
I don't personally believe that we are created in the physical image of God. Perhaps our psyche, our thoughts, the philosophical attitudes that we have evolved are a reflection of a deity. But physically, no, I can't see that we are an imitation of a physical God. My concept of a God is much more nebulous than that. I can't envision a deity that is in the shape of a human being per se.
Tselem Elohim doesn't necessarily imply physicality.
So,
Natalie and Pam.
yeah, I'm a little confused. We're supposedly created in the image of God, and then they talk about we have a piece of God in us.
Oh, no, that's the Babylonians. That was from the Emunah Elish but yes, okay, in Judaism too, later there was developed the idea that there's a soul and the soul is divine. Yes, but that's not from the Genesis text, no.
Okay, so that came later with a different group.
Yes.
But is that what most Jews believe?
Maybe, yes.
And how is the image of God different from I have some of God within me?
That's for you to answer. Everybody has their own religious beliefs. We're not going to tell you what the answer to that would be.
He's Jonathan Heston.
I don't think that's the answer to my question.
Okay, ask it again.
Okay. How does it differ? Forget about my soul, forget about me personally. How does it differ, the concept of we are created in the image of God, with humans have a part of God in them, and that's one of the reasons we should be good people or follow what we think God wants of us.
So what is the question?
What is the difference between being created in an image of God,
Right,
or having part of God in every human being?
Oh, well, I guess created in the image of God. Well, I don't, yeah, I mean, I don't want to prejudice people by giving too much detail, but created in the image of God can mean a whole bunch of things. All it is in the Torah, it says, B'Tselem Elohim bara. So God created us in the image of God. What does that mean? Image doesn't necessarily mean, as Evelyn pointed out, physical image, but
Right.
presumably we have something divine in our essence in some way, or maybe we look like God. I don't know, but it's
So wouldn't that be similar to when the Babylonians spoke and said, we have God with a part of God within us?
could be, depends how you interpret it, but could be, but could not be. I'm sorry if I'm being vague.
I'm sorry
I
if I'm confusing.
He's being
well,
vague.
I'm
Thank
thinking,
you.
well, I don't want to give my opinion too strongly, but I think the Babylonians may have been talking about something different than what the Hebrews were talking about. But what's in the Bible here and what post-biblical Judaism thinks is two different things. So, when we talk about Judaism today, we're talking about, adding all sorts of ideas that were not in the Bible. So it's definitely very different. Does that answer your question a little bit more? No.
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 So because I have God within me, if I believe in that,
Right.
then I have this connection and more of a possibility of doing the right thing. That's what I would like to believe.
And I think that's a perfectly reasonable post-biblical Jewish view. But I'm not sure that it's fully supported just by the text in the Bible.
But if it helps me to be a better person, to have a focus, to have meaning and a connection with something other than the world around me, then it works.
No, I think it works. Right. No, I fully agree. Yes,
it works for me. That's what I mean.
And it may work for many of us, but I'm just pointing out it's not fully developed in the biblical text. You'd have to
my belief isn't completely developed either, I have to tell you. So, okay, same page.
All right, Pam and then Cy.
Well, I guess an idea is similar to Natalie. I think we're built in the image of God because we've been given the ability to tell right from wrong. And God just wants us to figure out which is which.
Which in many cases is simple and in some cases is more complicated.
Yeah. But
this moral sense. But my point is that a lot of the ideas on which we draw on for understanding what might mean the image of God are not in this text, in the Bible. That was my only point. Okay, Cy.
Cy, you have to unmute.
Doing it.
There you go.
You hear me now?
You got it.
Okay. I'm always perplexed by the fact that when there was the initial recognition of a one God was done amongst a great many societies that did not believe in a one God. They had many gods. And I can't quite understand how this group of people came to the conclusion that there was only one God. It just doesn't make sense to me that from many came one when they're living amongst all these people that have many gods. This is something that maybe took a lot longer than the Bible writes about. It might have developed in different ways, and I'm curious about that. You got any ideas?
That's for the group. Anybody want to respond to Cy? Bernie, and then I'll come to Pam next. But
A
Bernie
little
now.
bit, I want to respond. Even in the Ten Commandments, it says that I am the chief God. There are basically what it says, because it says you shall have no other gods before me. And that says that even then, it is not recognized that there's only one God.
Okay.
Well, that's kind of an
Richard?
arbitrary thing, all of a sudden, the Ten Commandments says there's only one God. This I would imagine would take thousands of years to come to that conclusion.
Bernie?
The Ten Commandments doesn't say there's one God. It says there's one chief God. You shall have no other gods before me, which to me suggests that there are other gods.
Which is what they call monolatry. So it's a form of monotheism that's not entirely monotheistic. There may be other gods, but they're not very important and they're not worth taking note of. And we're focusing only on the one God who's a real big, important God, and just ignore those other gods who are really trivial. So Bernie may be correct, Cy, back to you.
Yeah, you got something, Bernie.
Okay, anyone from the other, Richard or Natalie, you want to respond to that? Okay, Marcia,
Okay, you want me to read?
do you have any comments?
No.
So can we summarize, what did we decide about in the image of God?
Whatever you want it to be.
It's a personal, it's more a matter of the soul rather than the physiology, I think.
It's the personal moral self.
Yeah, good.
Personal moral self.
Mhm.
Okay, so, and
It's a good way of
It
But
putting it.
can you have a moral self without that connection?
okay, this is a long-standing philosophical question. Can you have a moral sense or a fully developed sense of morality without that connection to God? Meaning, is morality part of religion, indivisibly part of religion? And this was what in the early reformers called ethical monotheism.
Yeah.
So your ethics are based on your monotheism. If there's one God and God says there's some things right and wrong, then that is how you derive your ethical system. But of course,
But if God gave us freedom of choice, then he's not saying this is the way it is and it's fixed. He's allowing me to make poor choices, good choices, and in between choices.
okay.
I think,
Yes, Marcia.
I think that people who don't even know who make like you say, Natalie, have these choices that they make, or beliefs and or attitudes towards people, or whatever you want to call it. They may not even consider that they have a God, but they still have that power in them to be moral people. It doesn't matter whether you call it God or not. If you have your behavior and your attitudes and your feelings towards people proper, and you're still following that path of righteousness, if you will, and you don't have to call it God.
Right.
Evelyn?
What about those people who are either immoral or amoral, have no sense of what is right and wrong? Do they consider that they have God inside them anyway? And do they still believe in God? They will worship at a church or at a synagogue and still commit wrongdoing, and feel that they are in favor or God is in favor of them anyway. And how do you categorize those who have no sense of morality? Where would you put them?
They shall be called no goodniks.
Most of them run
Marsha's
for
good at-
office.
Marsha's good at quoting the Torah, see?
Yeah.
That's a very good question. So you're saying people who are still connected to religion, but have no morality despite that. Then you
Yes,
have other groups where they are completely disconnected from religion, but they would argue that they can just be as moral or more moral than people who are connected to religion, right?
right.
So you have all sorts of diverse situations, and you have to come up with one overarching theory to cover them all, which is not going to be easy. Okay, Marcia, we can continue.
Okay. Where am I? Echoing, I think that's where I am.
Very bottom of page 22 on the right-hand side.
Echoing the Torah's creation story, the psalmist not only captures the mystery of God's creation, but also elaborates the role and responsibility of human beings. Oh God, our God, how majestic is your name throughout the earth, you who have covered the heavens with your splendor. When I behold your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars that you set in place, what are human beings that you have been mindful of them? Mortals that you have taken note of them, that you have made them little less than divine and adorned them with glory and majesty. You have made the master over your handiwork, laying the world at their feet.
Okay, and this is called interbiblical commentary, where part of the Bible comments on other parts of the Bible. So the Psalms obviously were written later, presumably later than the book of Genesis, and they're in the third section of the Tanakh, whereas the book of Genesis is in the first section of Tanakh, and they basically recount the story that we read today, or that, that is our parsha of the week. And so what is the Psalm? This is Psalm 8. And what does it say? Well, what is the main point here?
God has given man dominion over the world that he has created.
Ah, okay. And is that good or bad?
Well,
Turned out to be not so good.
Is it true? Is it
considering
true?
what the situation of the world now.
Do we have dominion over the world?
At the moment, yeah. We
So
are dominant
We have dominion over the universe.
if an elephant in Africa says he wants more grazing space, and people say no, we want more roads and towns, who's going to win?
the people. The people.
Okay.
We are the
So-
dominant form on earth at the present. And
So
That we
So-
know of.
if we want to put up wires for electrical things and the birds hit those wires, we do what we want, and the birds have to either adapt or die.
yes, but you have people who have a sense of consciousness that says we must also treat other living creatures on this earth with respect. And therefore, if we do harm to them, we have to change our ways so that we don't do harm to them. And so,
Oh my God, but we're not doing that. We're killing like 90% of all the species are in the process of disappearing. And the ones that are not totally disappearing, their habitats are being cut down to a tiny fraction. So you'll have a few of the animals in a few zoos, and then there'll be 2 or 3 little patches with, a few hundred here, a few hundred there. Whereas, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, there was millions of whatever animal roaming all over the planet. So we're not very considerate at all for any of these other species.
yeah, well, the point is that man is not only destroying other life on earth, he is destroying the environment that we require to exist. We are fouling the air that we live in. We are fouling the water that we rely on. And so if man does not get his act together, shall we say, man will succeed in destroying himself. And whereas God, I think, has a hands-off policy. And what man will do. And if man succeeds in killing himself and destroying, God will create another form of life that will become dominant on this earth.
And you saw the movie, The Planet of the Apes, right? That came out in the early 70s with Charlton Heston. And at the end of the movie, I don't want to spoil the movie, but if you haven't seen it by now, you had 50 years to see it, or more. He's riding on the beach with his horse and with his new girlfriend who doesn't speak. And what does he bump into in the sand?
The Statue of Liberty on its side, and yes, a destroyed civilization. And that's what may happen if we keep up with nuclear wars. Then at some point there will be most of the population on Earth. This is science fiction. Now it may come to reality that a good part of mankind will be wiped out, and then there will be very few people left, and they will continue on to create a new world as such. It's not very promising, but who knows what could be.
And I love watching these zombie series where there's an outbreak of virus or fungus, and most of the world turns into zombies, and then there's a few people that are not, and they try to rebuild civilization and not get infected at the same time. Pam, Shirley, Bernie, Steve.
Excellent
Okay.
comments, though.
Okay. Marsh, you want to keep going?
Jewish tradition holds that one God created the heavens and earth, but it also teaches that human beings are masters of the world. Their choices make a difference. The power of life or death, survival or destruction is in their hands. But Jewish tradition goes a step further. While the first chapters of Bereshit, or Genesis, describe in detail what was created on each of the 6 days of creation, Jewish interpreters of Torah did not take that explanation as an exact report of what had happened. Instead, they offered many different opinions. For example, some of the rabbis argued that God had created everything on the first day. Then on each of the 5 following days, God introduced what had already been formed. Other rabbis disagreed. They believed that the creation of light came before everything else. Still others taught that God, like an unsatisfied artist looking for perfection, had created and destroyed many worlds before deciding that this one was acceptable. Genesis Rabbah. And do teachers say that the world was created in 6 24-hour days? The most famous interpreter of the Torah, Solomon ben Isaac, known best as Rashi, denied this. He pointed out that the word yom, or day, could mean thousands of years. As proof for his argument, he quoted the ancient psalmist who had written, "For a day in your sight is like 1,000 years," from Psalms 90. For Rashi, God's creation of the world did not happen within 6 24-hour days, but rather over thousands of years. The Torah, he explained to his 11th century students, does not intend to teach us the order of creation. Most Torah interpreters agree with Rashi. The Torah does not offer us a scientific explanation of creation. It offers us something of great importance. Well before modern science, Jews realized that the purpose of Torah was not to tell us how the world was created, but to help us understand who created all the wonders of the heavens and earth. The creation story of Bereshit is not a lesson in evolution. It neither contradicts modern scientific theories nor requires proofs from the laboratory. The Torah story of creation is meant to express our sense of wonder about the origins of the world in which we live. It reaffirms our faith that one God formed and sustains all of cosmic existence, and that human beings are partners with God in preserving and advancing the precious gift of life.
You're here.
Okay. He actually finished a whole thing,
I
apparently.
know, can you believe that?
But that is his interpretation. There's others who believe exactly the opposite, that God created the earth in 6 days, days that we know as 6 days, and that the earth is only 5,700 years old. Very strongly believe that.
Do you know anybody who believes that?
I've met some people, yes, and I remember very strongly when this is 1974. I was at the Army hospital cafeteria eating lunch. This is how strong I remember this. And I sat down with one of my fellow doctors who I knew well, and he was Mormon, but I never discussed anything with him about his Mormon religion. And for some reason, we got on the Bible or in creation, just out of discussion. And he was very adamant that it was 5,700 years old and that God created everything in one day. He was a very fundamentalist. And there was another Mormon who was in my division at the hospital. He and I were ENT partners in a clinic, and he believed the same thing very strongly, that God created everything in 6 days, and that he rested on the seventh day, and that the earth was 5,700 years old. Did I talk to any Jewish people about it? I think I did, but I didn't have the impression like this person, these two people, how strongly they felt. So yes, it's a belief. This our author in this book doesn't believe that, obviously, and I don't either. I believe Rashi.
Okay. And if Rashi said thousands of years for each day, that's just because he didn't realize that we were talking about not thousands of years, but maybe millions of years. But
Right.
it's the same idea along the same. So in Judaism, we don't really have fundamentalism, because even if you're very orthodox, you're going to follow what the Talmud says, and the Talmud and rabbinic thinking such as Rashi do not accept the Torah as literal. There's all these interpretive tools to take the Torah and interpret it. And so even a very strict Orthodox Jew is not, according to a modern American definition, a fundamentalist. And therefore, I don't think very many Jews, no matter how Orthodox, are going to necessarily believe that the world is 57, 84 years old. It doesn't seem, I mean, there may be a few who believe it, but I don't think it's required in their religion, if you will. Okay, other comments, Steve, Bernie? So where does this leave us? We now have a creation story. We're all familiar with God created the world in the 6 days, rested on the seventh. And there's an interesting thing there too, because it seems to say God created the world on 6 days. How does it go? And then rested. And it should say, it should make it clear that it was on the seventh day that God rested. But
Well, Rabbi,
yes.
the very concept of resting one day a week must have been unusual, because in previous times or earlier times, in the time of the Torah, people were obligated to work 24 hours, 7 days a week. And the fact that the religion required one day of rest showed that physically as well as spiritually, it was better to have this day of rest, to reconsider the week and to just contemplate, shall we say, our existence as such. And those people who do today tend to be workaholics. Actually, in the long run, don't survive as well as those who take time off, either for religion or play, to refresh their minds and their bodies, and so function better physically as well as mentally or emotionally when there is that one day of rest.
Right. And just taking periods of rest, period. With email and stuff, it's become harder to do that. And so there's a whole new phenomenon about this digital burnout. So, whereas before you'd leave the office at whatever time, 5 o'clock or 8 o'clock, but once you left the office, you were disconnected from anything. You couldn't do any work. Now, the emails just sort of, at any hour, just plop into your inbox. And, so I think, well, if I don't answer them on my day off, then I have to answer them the next day. So I might as well answer them now. But as Evelyn says, it's very important to just turn stuff off and, just don't think, do something fun. And that will, in the long run, will help it better. What I was pointing out is in the Torah portion from this week in chapter 2 at the beginning, on the seventh day, it says, the skies, the earth, and all its numerous components were completed. On the seventh day, God completed his work that he had made. On the seventh day, he rested from all his work that he had done. So that could be interpreted, said, on the seventh day, God completed his work. So the Torah seems to imply that God was still working at the beginning of the seventh day. And it's on the beginning of the seventh day that he finished stuff up. The Samaritans, as you probably know, have their own Torah. And in the Samaritan Torah, it says the way it should. It says, on the sixth day, God finished all his work. And then in the seventh day, God rested. Whereas in our version, it's a little bit ambiguous, or it seems to imply that God was still working in the beginning of the seventh day. So this is a big, big theological problem.
So Sumerians are they considered Jewish or separate?
Samaritans are considered Jewish by some and not by others. There was a big fight.
Oh, really?
Can you imagine that?
Always, yeah.
But it was the same religion, but the Samaritans had their own Torah, which was it used Proto-Hebrew letters, so it's harder to read. And it got hundreds of small differences, including the one here. And so comparing the Samaritan Torah to our Torah can be very, very interesting. But which Torah is older? That's which version's older? That's very, very important. And who changed what, why? And that's an interesting field. There's other versions of Torahs. There's translations. We have the Septuagint, which is the Jewish Greek translation of the entire Tanakh into Greek. And it also differs from the Hebrew in significant ways. In many ways, it matches the Samaritans. There's also a translation / interpretation called the Peshitta, which was probably written in Aramaic in Syria, by a group that maybe they were Jews and maybe not. And that also has quite a bit of differences. And so we don't know who the group was, and we certainly don't know why it's got differences. So if you
Can I
want to
ask
learn...
a question before we
Yes.
leave?
Yes.
I understand all that was said about 5784. What does one say when their Christian friends ask them, what is 5784? What's the explanation?
Oh, that's easy. Well, that, according to the Bible, that's how many years since the creation of the world. So we don't take that literally.
Right, so that's what you say. That's what you say to others, even though you yourself don't.
Well,
That's
it's
just
not.
the
It's not a belief.
explanation.
It's just that if you count from the biblical, according to the biblical story, and you just count the years out, it'll be 5784. but no Jews believe that that's how old the world actually is. It's just how the numbers count. For just to compare, the Christian year is 2023, and that's supposed to be from when Jesus was born, but Jesus wasn't born in that year. He's born 4 years earlier, or maybe, or we don't even know. So all of these are just ways, at some point people felt the need to put a number on a year. So at some point, the Jews just did a counting of literally how many years there were, and they came up with a number. So it's just a way to count years. But it's not actually intended to represent the number of years from actual creation. And counting years in the Bible can lead to problematic results elsewhere. We read in the Torah and Rosh Hashanah the story of the binding of Isaac, and if you count the years in that situation, Isaac was 36 or 37 when he was almost sacrificed by Abraham, and clearly the story is that of a small child, so that wouldn't work either. So you can't count things literally. Marcia.
I think that the Catholics probably believe in that same number, don't they? Because they believe in the Old and New Testament, and if they are going to do that, because my brother-in-law, who was Catholic, he would have been considered a fundamentalist, because whatever it said, that's the way it was, and you didn't vary from the scriptures, and people who are like that are very adamant about it.
Well, and the Catholics I knew in Alabama, I worked for the Spring Hill College, which was a Catholic Jesuit college, and the Jesuits running it, the priests running it, were not like that at all.
Jesuits are different. That's why
they were highly intellectual, and they knew all this stuff backwards and forwards, and they talked very remarkably similar to the way I talk.
Scholars, really, yeah.
But I'm sure there's fundamentalist Catholics, and that's why every church and every group and where there's always, left wing and right wing and middle wing, and people have different views on religion. So, but here the creation of the world story potentially has a lot to inspire us. Like, just look at Richard's background. Richard is coming from us from 400 light years away. And it's inspiring to look at that background. It just, how can we use this creation story to inspire us religiously, and to, religious inspiration can be the source of great art, as we know, right? Like a lot of the Renaissance artists and musicians were inspired by biblical stories. And so there's a lot of creativity that's possible. And as we said earlier, we can also use it for a source of ethics. And if God created the whole world, then everyone should be respected. Not only different types of people, but even the ants and the bugs and the cockroaches and everything. So, but I'm not trying to start a movement for the cockroach rights. So don't worry about that. Final comments. We have just about 6 minutes. We can end early, but if anyone would like to say something profound about creation, this is your chance.
Creation.
How would we categorize very early peoples who could be considered humanoids, part of the human race as we know it today, where they lived in caves, made these petroglyphs, paintings? I think of the caves in France that are so famous, and in Spain, where they left their history, and yet they were capable of thought. They were capable of perhaps thinking the way we do, other than they lacked the knowledge that came much later. Would we consider them religious, or did religion begin just with written history per se?
All right, well, we're gonna have to save that question for next time, but when does religion start? And the short answer is I think sure that we would start religion long before written history. But since it wasn't written, we don't know much about it, but sure, it was there. Marcia, final comment and then back
Oh,
to
no, I
Steve.
was gonna answer Evelyn if we have time.
Yes,
Just that, I would think it started with possibly with something like superstitions, which then evolved into if we do this, then that will happen, and then we wind up finding a way to, well, get a god out of that somehow, and
What do you actually think is religion then? Paganism, spirituality, what we think of as more organized religion?
yes, I think all of the above.
I agree, all of the above.
Well, it was an explanation for a phenomenon that man did not know the answer to. And so you had to attribute it to a greater authority, being, something, which is how gods were created. They couldn't understand lightning or thunder or the mountains or clouds or rain. And so they attributed gods to it, a superior being to explain its existence, not understanding that it was a physical phenomenon as such. And I suppose over the hundreds of thousands of years, religion eventually developed into religion as we know it today.
What I think I just heard Evelyn say was that man created God.
Yes.
In a way, yes.
Yes.
God is within man's mental existence as such. The animals, we don't know. I doubt whether an elephant or a tiger or what have you has thoughts other than that which is instinctive for survival, whereas man has evolved a brain that enables him to develop these thoughts. And so, in a sense, God is within man, per se. I mean, this is how I can explain it.
Quick rebuttal from Richard, Natalie.
Evelyn's right.
Oh,
I don't know.
Early. Steve. Okay, now you have the schedule up to the middle of April. If you don't have this, you can ask Charlotte for it. And we're trying to put together a lunch at Panera Bread. So please email me when you're available. We want to talk about alternative sources. And if you have any, bring them with you to the lunch. Steve, back to you for the final blessing and see you soon.
Very good. Let us conclude then with the final blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan לנו Torah v'chai olam v'tam etokenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Blessed is Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who has given us the teaching of truth, planting within us eternal life. Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen. I firstly want to thank everyone who did contribute toward the food bank holiday drive. We collected a ton, literally a ton of food for the Valley View Food Bank. And believe me, it was when Jesse saw the boxes and all the bags, he was just in awe. So I just want to personally thank everyone for contributing to that most amazing job. Thank you very much. Happy New Year, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Rabbi, which Panera are we talking about?
I'm flexible, but probably the one halfway between Sun City and Sun City Grand.
Oh, that one that's in Sun City Grand.
Yeah.
I mean, not in Sun City, in Surprise.
Surprise off of
Yeah,
Bell
okay.
and
But I'm flexible if people want to meet in the one in Glendale or something, I'm flexible on that.
Yeah, I emailed you,